This is the MEN2 Podcast with Scott and Mick. On this week's episode, we talk about the complete lack of collusion between Trump and Russia, government censorship in reaction to recent events, and we apologise to Jussie Smollett.
Trump, Putin, Russian collusion.
Trump, Russian sort of collusion.
Trump, Russian, possible collusion.
Trump, Russian, metal collusion.
Trump, Russia, possible collusion.
Trump, Russian, potentially collusion.
Trump, Russia, possible collusion.
So after a couple of years of blaming Trump for colluding with the Russians to steal the election, you'd think with the release of the Attorney General's summary of the Mueller report showing, quote, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. You'd think the Democrats might have a moment of introspection. And they would say, hey, maybe we ran a shitty candidate that felt entitled, that relied on celebrity endorsement and playing the woman card, and that talked down to half the country and neglected to even campaign in some of the key swing states that ultimately lost to the election. But no, if the last couple of days is any indication, they've decided not to do that.
No collusion.
No.
So it's been about, what was it like, about 600 days, roughly, of investigations.
Oh, yeah, 2 years in.
A team of 20 lawyers and FBI agents and
500 witnesses called.
Yeah. How many subpoenas? There was a lot of hundreds of subpoenas, maybe thousands of subpoenas.
Not thousands, but
questions
hundreds.
to foreign governments, all of that. And at the end of the day, it's
no collusion.
No collusion.
Now, we should say, so the Mueller report hasn't been released. Mueller, the way this works is Mueller hands his report to the Attorney General, who then wrote a 4-page summary in lieu of more disclosures to come. I mean, he can't wait for the whole thing to be published. Obviously, the public needs to know something.
Yeah, but
so he comes out with a 4-page report.
Well, it's a summary report prepared by the new Attorney General, Bill Barr.
I mean, he's got no incentive to lie because he's just going to look like a complete fool if he came out and said, oh, no, there's nothing to see here when there actually is. I mean, it would be absurdly ridiculous for him to do that.
Well, you'd think as well, if Bill Barr's summary report wasn't accurate, that somebody in Mueller's team would have leaked how it's not accurate. And so far there's been no leaks. There's been no one on Mueller's team to say, sorry, that's actually not what was in the report at all.
No. The double whammy to the Trump-Russia possible collusion crowd is not only was Trump campaign cleared of collusion with Russia, but that, quote, evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offence. Because the report is basically in 2 parts. It's about the collusion aspect and whether Trump obstructed the investigation. Now, those words I just read are the Attorney General's conclusion, not Mueller's. Mueller actually decided not to conclude anything. He, and I'll quote the Barr report again, after making a thorough factual investigation into these matters of obstruction we're talking about, the special counsel considered whether to evaluate the conduct under department standards governing prosecution and declination decisions, but ultimately determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment. The special counsel therefore did not draw a conclusion one way or the other as to whether the examined conduct constituted obstruction. Instead, for each of the relevant actions investigated, the report sets out evidence on both sides of the question and leaves unresolved what the special counsel's views as difficult issues of law and fact concerning whether the president's actions and intent could be viewed as obstruction. The special counsel states that while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it does not exonerate him. And so the conclusion that Barr reached, that there wasn't sufficient evidence to establish obstruction, is based partly on the fact that because there's no evidence of conclusion, there doesn't seem to be much of a motive for obstruction. I mean, if you didn't conclude, why obstruct?
Collude.
What did I say? Conclude. If he didn't collude, then why obstruct? And so, why did, for example, Trump fire Comey? He must be trying to cover it up, obstruct.
Even when they, Andrew McCabe, who took over from Comey, I think he was Comey's second in charge. Even when he was questioned under oath, he said that there was no obstruction by the Trump team on the Mueller case. Yeah.
So almost as though Trump made it look like he had something to hide, but actually, I mean, if you play into this idea that Trump's this master genius, it's as though he's orchestrated this whole thing to make it look like he was obstructing, but then he knew the report was going to say that he didn't obstruct, and he just made a fool of the media. I mean that.
Well, he's made it. Well, I mean, this whole thing's made a fool of the media because they've been their narrative for the last 2 years is Trump-Russia collusion, Trump-Russia collusion, and now it's come out that there was no collusion, and in fact, the Russians seems like some Russians actually reached out to Trump several times, and this is covered in the report, and he actually didn't do anything with them. He actually denied them to do anything with them. So,
I mean. But of course, the mainstream media is out with headlines about how this report raises more questions than it answers. And of course, it's a 4-page report. You know, come on, we want to get something out in front of the public as quick as possible, and this is what we've done. You know, but so and Barr even says in that 4-page report, we haven't finished doing a thorough analysis, but this is what we can say at this point. But of course, you've got the tearful Rachel Maddow out there yesterday with her 15 questions of the Barr report. Why did Mueller not decide on obstruction? Should Barr have decided on obstruction? Was there a full investigation into Trump's intent regarding obstruction? They're just reaching now. I mean, this is desperation.
I'm looking forward to the BuzzFeed article. 15. Here's why it's a good thing that Trump didn't collude with Russia. Like you need it. I mean, that's funny. I've seen quite a few videos now on YouTube. I think there's one from Fleckus Talks. He's sort of the stocky bearded guy who he has a wooden spoon on a microphone, and he generally goes to a lot of these. He goes to universities in California, and he tends to just ask people, what do you think about certain things? And he was at USC, one of the big universities, and was asking people, are you happy that, Trump didn't collude with Russia? Isn't that a good thing that Trump didn't collude with Russia? That your president didn't collude with Russia? And actually quite a few people were like, yeah, it's great. And, I thought it was bullshit anyway. And then you get sort of the people who are obviously...
want it to be true.
Who want it to be true, and you kind of see their heads ticking. And they can't actually come up with a good argument, and they just go, fuck Trump, and they walk off.
Yeah.
It's just that.
But I mean, that's a cognitive dissonance there. Like... As much as you want this to be true about Trump to get rid of him, isn't it better that actually your government didn't conspire?
Oh, it's great. It's good news, and I mean, it should at this point it should just be now. It's time to just get stuff done.
Yeah,
but it won't be because they're just the Democrats will continue on with it. They want to bring Mueller up in front of Congress and have him testify under oth and
play into Trump's hands. I mean, more and more, and the people that are sitting on the fence and don't, the swing voters or whatever. I mean, they're going to look at this and go, "This is just such." It's a witch hunt now. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. Well, it's been a witch hunt for the whole.
The thing about the whole Mueller probe is that now some of the Republicans are saying we need to investigate how this thing came up, because there's the theory is that this whole thing started because of this Christopher Steele dossier of information, which was actually funded by the Hillary Clinton. Yeah, it's Oppo Research.
Complete bullshit.
And unverified it was given to the FBI, who didn't verify its authenticity. Then they used it to obtain a FISA warrant to spy on Carter Page.
I saw something like somewhere in one of those articles about 58 people that could possibly be brought up or be investigated for this, for how this got going. So that's going to be interesting. I mean, it just plays into... I mean, everything seems to be playing into Trump's hands at the moment. As I've said, and you and I think, agree on this, that the only thing that seems to be able to derail him is probably the economy. If the economy tanks before now in the election, I mean, that could derail him. But everything else seems to be just going in his favour.
Yeah. My expectation is that they're going to push towards, another special counsel to investigate how this came up, to investigate the possible collusion between, spying on an opponent's presidential campaign.
It'd be great to see Jake Tapper up there in front of Congress. Jake Tapper and Matt Howard.
Yeah. Bill Maher, maybe. Speaking of Bill Maher, well, I liked his little comment on his show. He's saying, I don't need actual evidence. I know he's guilty. I can watch him on TV and I know he's guilty of collusion. Who
needs facts?
Yeah. Overrated facts are, apparently.
Here's one more damning indictment of the mainstream media bubble. CNN did a poll on March 26th, and they asked potential voters to choose the most important issue for the 2020 election for them. the most important issue, and they could write their own issue in. They didn't have to just choose one of the 10 that were put up.
Is it impeach Trump, the number one?
And so there's issues from healthcare to immigration, and the Russian investigation was one of them. And have a guess how many people said the Russian investigation was the most important.
So this is the day after the report was released.
Yeah, the date of the video says 26th of March.
So yeah, it was a couple of days after the Mueller's report.
Yep.
I'm going to take a guess at 0%.
And you would be right. 0% of those polled thought that was the most important issue when voting in 2020. So this is.
I wish they had done it a week before the Mueller report came out, just to sort of.
Yeah.
say.
Well, that I mean, maybe that skewed it, but even Fox did a poll before it came out, and only 7% of people said that it would strongly sway their opinion of Trump. 7% said it would strongly sway their opinion. Something like another 14%, like it would sway their opinion somewhat.
Yeah.
So people just aren't focused on it. They don't care. So even if you are a diehard Democrat who thinks Trump is crooked up to his neck, including with the Russians, none of those people were willing to say so on a poll after the report had come out. So I don't know. It just is this fundamental disconnect between what cable news outlets are saying and the population.
Yeah, I'm a bit dubious about a CNN poll, to be honest.
Well, but the thing, it's CNN, so you would think, if anything, it's going to be skewed to the half of people think it's the most important thing.
Well, no,
It's
because
just
now
the
they want to
opposite.
change the narrative because they've been proven wrong. Now they're going to find something else to focus on, whether it's, the border wall or...
Well, guess what was the number one concern of people polled?
On CNN?
Yeah.
The wall?
Immigration.
Yeah.
Immigration, yeah.
Like letting more immigrants in.
Yeah.
Illegal immigrants.
Yeah. Well, who knows? I mean, if
Yeah.
you're... Depends which side of the fence you're on. If you're for open borders, you might think the immigration's the biggest
I would
issue.
assume that most people watching CNN are probably for open borders
Yeah.
at this point.
So it's hard really to say. But, I mean, healthcare didn't even... I think healthcare rated 4th or something. The integrity of the candidates rated 3rd, I think, something like that. So, and I think... And even that's sort of misleading because Trump's, dirty laundry's out there, so it's going to be more about the candidates who are running for Democrat more than anything else. So, but it's just, I just think it shows a complete disconnect. I mean, of course, they're all running with the, we should say that this investigation led to 34 criminal indictments. There was Russian meddling in the elections.
Oh,
There's
no
no doubt
doubt
about that. It's just, hey, Trump wasn't in on it.
But I think even, looking back to how much... I think the indictments against the Russians, I think there were 10 or 12 Russians indicted. But, obviously they never got hauled up in front of court because, well, they're in Russia.
Yeah.
But I think even when I think on those indictments, it specified how much money that these Russian groups spent on, most of it was Facebook ads and trying to just sow the seeds of dissonance, basically. And I think they only spent, like $20 or $30 million.
Yeah.
And if you compare that to how much money Hillary Clinton spent on her campaign, she spent probably, close to $2 billion.
Yeah, double what.
So,
Trump spent.
how much meddling, how much effect did it really have?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I've seen multiple analysis about, actually, all you do is harden people's preconceived opinions with most of this stuff. So if there's negative press about Trump, it just seems to reinforce the people who already have a negative view of Trump. It doesn't really swing anybody.
Yeah.
And same with Clinton. If something comes out negative, Clinton, I already hate Clinton, so this just reinforces what I already think of her.
Yep.
What
percentage of people do you think are actually can be swayed from one side to another?
Oh, it's not big, I don't think.
But do you think this whole Trump-Russia collusion thing? Because I've seen bits and pieces online about people who said I've been a Liberal voter and I thought there was this. I'm really just shocked now, and I'm starting to think about whether my preconceived notions are actually true, and maybe
I think it's
maybe everything I believed is wrong.
It's single-digit percentages, I think. I mean, because even before I think this came out, I forget the numbers, but pretty much if you're a Republican Party member, you vote Republican all the time. You're you vote Democrat. And the swing voters are not, they matter, obviously, but they're less than 10%.
Yeah.
Yeah, mate.
Maybe this is why the Democrats need immigrants flooding over the border, because they know that those people are most likely going to vote Democrat.
That's been a right-wing talking point for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, can illegal immigrants vote? I mean, I know this is an issue. I'm just wondering what the actual rate is.
It's not whether, legally they can't, but they do. There's evidence to show that some of them do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's. I mean, this is one of those left-wing ideas which I don't understand why they've gone so far with this. This idea that you're not even allowed to call people who cross the border illegally, which is a federal crime, illegal aliens. Like this is somehow, they're undocumented workers.
Yeah, right.
No,
of course.
You crossed the border illegally. You've committed a federal crime.
Yep.
I'm not talking about genuine refugees who've fled persecution. We're talking about economic migrants. The same way that Douglas Murray reported that 60% of the people that's showing up at Marseille, the entrance to Europe, one of those main entrances, were economic migrants. They weren't refugees, and yet the mainstream media was conflating those two categories as though they're all the same. Oh, these are all refugees. No, 60% of them had no more right to be there than you or I did. I mean, they're just coming from poor countries in search of a better life.
Well, if you think about it, the more people crossing the border illegally, the more money and resources need to be spent on processing those people, and it's going to make it harder for people who are coming legally to actually get in.
Yeah,
they're just jumping the queue basically.
Yeah, they're queue jumpers.
It's just
it's one of those. Yeah, it's one of those issues. Strange, but I think we can say Trump Russia possible collusion is bullshit. We hope you're enjoying the podcast, and if you'd like to support us to keep it going, you can donate via PayPal at paypal.me/MEN2 Pod.
These social media companies have built this technology, they've created these capabilities, and in the overwhelming majority of cases they're available for peaceful and happy purposes. But we do know that they can be used and weaponised by terrorists.
So with regards to the Christchurch terrorist attack, I've deliberately refrained from talking about the actual attack itself, and I'll continue to do that so as not to give the oxygen smuggler who carried it out any airplay, and because what I think is more important is how society deals with the aftermath of such an incident. But unfortunately, I have to say, given the reactions, or should I say overreactions, of the government and telecommunications companies and journalists, it doesn't give me a lot of hope. So let's run through some of those overreactions. So first, the New Zealand government ruled the terrorist footage and the manifesto to be classified as objectionable. Now, you might say that's a little vague, but it's actually a legal definition in New Zealand. They've applied this classification previously to, say, ISIS videos. So basically what it means, for any New Zealand citizen, it is illegal to have a copy of the video or the document or to share these with others, and actually that's worse if you share it. And if you see it somewhere, you're supposed to report it to the New Zealand authorities. And I saw multiple reports that suggested if you're caught with these objectionable media, you can face up to 10 years in jail. And if you get caught sending it to someone over the internet, you could get up to 14 years in jail. And actually, some guy by the name of Philip Arps is currently being held for this very crime. He's being charged with 2 counts of distributing a live stream of the attack. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to that poor schmuck and how much time he gets, if any. Let's see what happens.
So I think, banning these documents and videos and things, I think it just actually draws more attention to them. It makes it a forbidden fruit. Yeah. And there's going to be people on the fringes of society who are more likely to actually start looking for this stuff.
Yeah, it's the Streisand effect.
Exactly. And, I guess there's a question is, people murder in the name of the Quran all the time. Should we ban the Quran as well?
Well, that's why the reaction is so disproportionate. I mean, we're seeing things now that we've never seen with any other terrorist attack. We've never seen it. And you have to ask why. Why are we doing this?
Well, it's because, look, it's got to be hard to be a politician who has to deal with this in the face of people saying, what are you going to do about it? You've got to have an answer. You can't just say, I'm not going to do anything about it.
Who is saying that, though?
Well,
that's the problem. It's the Chihuahua effect. Who is? It's a terrorist attack. We've had plenty of them. Let's go back to Waleed Ali's Sydney Morning Herald article of 2013. terrorism's not that big a deal, according to Waleed Aly. He seems to have changed his tune.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't understand the disproportionate reaction in the opposite direction. I mean, you had a ridiculous journalist, Australian journalist who works out of the United States. Some young woman wrote an article that said all white Australians should feel responsible for this. Now, that's the exact opposite of what they say every time there's a Muslim terrorist attack. They say, they wheel out a piano and sing, John Lennon songs, and that's not blame all Muslims. That's exactly what they say. And as soon as it's the opposite way, what do? Hypocrisy.
Yeah,
is
I mean,
just,
you're not going to give that much airtime. It's just a stupid argument to get clicks, basically, and try and get people upset. Stephen Franks, who's a constitutional lawyer and spokesman for the Free Speech Alliance, Free Speech Coalition in New Zealand, he was quoted as saying, "People are more confident of each other and their leaders when there is no room left for conspiracy theories, when nothing is hidden."
That's right. Yeah, that's a good
And
quote.
he then goes on to say, "The damage and risks are greater from suppressing these things than they are from trusting people to form their own conclusions and to see evil or madness for what it is."
We do this. It's just, those that don't learn from history are bound to repeat it. It's
exactly.
Just,
it is.
How many examples of this do you need throughout history?
Well, a lot more, apparently.
I mean, I don't know if people know the history in the late 20s and early 30s of the rise of the Nazi Party. They were continually suppressed, locked up, put in jail, and they played the victim card. Don't air them. Their ideas are bad. Just air them in public.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I think people like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson they've done a really good job in, they want to talk about this stuff, and they rip people apart very publicly. They rip their ideas apart very publicly. And that's what needs to happen here. It's like, okay, if you believe that, Muslims are an evil race of people and it's a cancer on society, well, let's get it on TV.
Yeah.
And let's get someone who can argue the point. Because if it's such a stupid argument, then it should be very easy to refute it.
Yeah.
And then, this stuff needs to be talked about.
No, that's where we are today, though. The left doesn't want to have conversations.
You might offend people.
Mm-hmm. But, now that you've brought up Peterson, which leads us to another overreaction by New Zealand bookstore Whitcoulls, I think I'm pronouncing that right, to ban Peterson's book 12 Rules for Life. Now, it's back up. You can buy it in all forms. But we don't even know the real reason it was banned. I mean, they gave some weaselly non-statement about some extremely disturbing material being circulated prior, during, and after the crime. I mean, what are you talking about? Some thought it was this guy's T-shirt who got a photo with Peterson in New Zealand in February at one of Peterson's shows. It said, "I'm a proud Islamophobe" on his shirt, along with a list of...
Well, it was a group photo, wasn't it? It wasn't just a photo of him and...
No, it was him and Peterson.
Just only together?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, just him and Peterson together. And, along with a list of sort of uncharitable claims about Islam, like Sharia... Sharia law says this, a woman's testimony is only worth half of a man. All these kind of claims about why Islam's so bad. I mean, the fact is, Peterson's had his photo taken with tens of thousands of people. I think, actually, there was an interview of him being grilled about this Pepe flag photo before. In that interview, he said 5,000 or 6,000 people, he said. So by now, it's probably over 10,000 people he's had his photo. And you imagine these people are shuffled through, smile, click, next. I mean, what is Peterson supposed to vet every one of these people's clothing?
He should be looking at all of their T-shirts.
I mean, is it possible...
And asking their political views.
He didn't even notice this guy's shirt. He's just like, put your arm around me, click, smile, done, next,
Yeah.
So, and then we find out 2 days ago that the reason that Peterson had his invitation of a visiting fellowship at Cambridge University retracted was that very photo. And another Weasley statement. I mean, academics are the cowards of this century, aren't they? Cambridge is an inclusive environment, and we expect all our staff and visitors to uphold our principles. There is no place here for anyone who cannot do that.
That's very inclusive.
Obviously, yeah. Yeah, Cambridge is an inclusive environment except for people who have their photos taken with things we
Except
don't
for people
agree
we don't
with.
agree with.
Just-
But besides that, we're very tolerant and inclusive.
You know that people always talk about, the left always talks about dog whistling to the right. Diversity and inclusion is the dog whistle of the left because it rarely means those things. It's usually conformity and exclusion.
Exactly. Well, interestingly, so White Cool's that bookstore that banned Peterson's book. They still have on sale Mein Kampf.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know what they're...
And a bunch of other,
Yeah.
and like the Satanic Verses. I don't think, I didn't search for the Quran. Maybe that's there. I don't know. But yeah, all kinds of books you can get. Anyway, as I said, I put my video out on, I'm not trying to claim causation here, but I put my video out on at 7 o'clock at night on Saturday night. Was it Saturday? I think it was. By Sunday morning, people were emailing, oh, it's back up again. So it was a short window. They must have just realised, who is making these decisions? They're looking at the news, listening to the media, which you shouldn't do, like for actual opinion, and reacting to it. And it's just dumb. I mean, I don't think it's hurt their business. I don't think there's any worldwide attempt to boycott it or anything, but it's just dumb. It's really stupid.
I mean, it's just, everyone's just rushing to the blame game. That's sort of my, it's the disappointing thing about this is you'd think we would learn something as a society coming from that. But, it seems like everyone's just rushed to blame whoever is their opponent in whatever their side is. The left's done it, the right's done it.
Yeah.
They're all supporting their own political view. And, I mean, there should only be one view about this, and that it was a horrible event perpetrated by a single person.
Yep.
And the only person to blame is that person.
Yeah.
There is no one else to blame.
It's I mean, these silly games about you had your photo taken with somebody. I mean, like, you could say to one of these leftards, you could say, oh, do you like dogs? Yeah. How about German Shepherds? Yeah, they're great. Well, Hitler loved German Shepherds. He, except when he poisoned them before he killed himself. But, it's just, that's how dumb it is. You had your photo taken. What you spoke, it's 6 degrees of separation, isn't it? You see this online a lot, like, Tommy Robinson once was in the EDL, right? And so Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin, interviewed him, and so now he's a Nazi because Tommy was once associated with an organisation that does actually have fringe Nazis in it, which he recused himself from for that very reason. And Sargon's interviewed him, so it's just it's absurd, and it says something about the standard of debate where there's no good faith intention to have a dialogue.
Yeah,
it's dishonest from the get go.
Yeah. So in Norway, I mean, I think do you remember that mass shooting in Norway about 4 or 5 years ago? 69 people were murdered at a summer. It wasn't a Labour camp. Yeah.
Brevin, whatever his name is.
Yeah, Anders Breivik, I think his name was.
Yep.
And there was a Danish journalist, Claus Bloch Thomsen. I reckon I got that name right. Klaus? Yeah, Klaus. It's like, that does sound a bit weird.
Klaus, Santa.
So he covered the trial of the mass murderer Anders Breivik. And during the trial, the media censored Breivik's views, which was supported by intellectuals and so-called experts.
Yeah.
But when he actually interviewed the families of the victims, he found many of them were actually very angry about that.
Yeah.
And here's a quote from that journalist. They said, talking about the families, when we start to censor ourselves, we just make him into a martyr.
Yeah.
And we are not able to learn how mad this guy was, what his thinking was.
Exactly.
Until everything is out in the light.
Well, of course, the intellectuals, they get access to it because they're the intellectuals and they know better than you and me.
Well, because all of the stupid plebs out there couldn't possibly have the intellect to decide whether this is evil or not.
Yeah. Well, speaking of self-censorship, how about this guy in New Zealand, a tradie, was sacked for, the headline said, sacked for Muslim comments. So Thomas Knight Wagner lost his job after making comments about Muslims following the Christchurch terrorist attack. In his words, because that's all we don't have anybody else's, he said, having an intellectual conversation about the comprehensive state of the Islamic movement on a global scale got me fired. He said, I didn't talk much about the Christchurch shooting, but that's how the conversation started. Wagner said that while talking about the shooting, he digressed to mention what he'd seen in news reports about the behaviour of Muslims living in the UK that had been shown to be violent and destructive. I elaborated on the current state of the UK in regards to the growing Islamic community and the crimes against the people in these communities. I said no swear words and was not abusive or aggressive in my manner. I was simply stating facts. which no one wanted to hear, obviously. When he questioned why he'd been moved on, he claimed the manager replied. He questioned the manager. He went in, the next day at work, and I think he went in the next day at work, and he worked that day. The following day after that, the manager said something was said on Saturday about the Christchurch shooting. That was all, and the manager claimed that one of the team members were offended by his comments, and that Mr. Knight Wagner didn't fit in with the team. I mean, so let's just say, let's give the guy the benefit of the doubt that he was just giving his honest opinion, right? And maybe he said some things that were wrong, short-sighted, generalizations.
So he said this at work.
At work.
At a conversation at work.
Just with a couple of mates. He's a tradie. And he was giving his honest opinion, let's say, and he's fired because, maybe he said something wrong, dumb, stupid. Who knows? Maybe he's just talking, extemporaneously. Hey, this is what I saw on the news. He hasn't done any great deal of research. But, do you remember what the world was like when people were actually able to have an opinion without being worried about being fired for it?
Yeah, but I guess there is a thing where, should you be talking about that stuff while you're working? I don't know.
Well, I mean, we don't know how it came up. I mean, did he just barge in and say, "Hey, let's talk about this thing that happened"? I mean, you can imagine in New Zealand, in the aftermath of this, on the first day of it. I mean, pretty much nothing else to talk about, really, is there? I mean, it's not like that he. I don't know. I mean, I agree that perhaps. I think one of the problems with this guy is that I think he was new. Maybe he didn't know the people. And, you or I, let's say we work in a place for a couple of years. We know the people we can talk to about it, and we can't, probably. He didn't have that filter, obviously.
Yeah.
But I do worry that, people, okay, if I say this, I'll get sacked. I mean, you see this all the time. I get emails every week. Every week on Facebook, people say, I work for such and such. I can't say anything, but, here's the thing. And usually I can't do anything with it because there's no documentation to back it up or anything. But
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those weird things. When you're at work, you should be working, and, I mean, people are obviously going to talk.
Yeah.
But I think it's sort of one of those things where, you need to be careful what you say at work because there's other people there who are not your friends.
Yeah.
That you work, and maybe people don't want to hear a lot of that stuff. I don't know. I'm sort of on the fence about this one. I think it depends on the context of the conversation.
Yeah, he did. I mean, to be fair, he hasn't got no job now. He was shifted to a different job. I mean, he's like a contract tradie, and the firm puts him somewhere, so they put him somewhere else, some other firm. Who knows? So I don't think he's not out on his ass.
Yeah, it could have been handled a lot better. I mean, that sort of thing is. Sit down with your boss. Boss says, look, mate, there's obviously this is a touchy subject for some people.
Yeah.
Best if you don't talk about it at work.
That would have been, you would have
You'd think that would be
get
the
a
best
warning
way.
like that.
Yeah.
It's just everybody, but see, everybody's ass covering, aren't they? It's like this bloke says, well, if I don't do anything, then maybe these workers are going to go to the press and say, this guy's mouthing off and, then people are going to boycott my company. I'm not going to have any business. I mean, this is a horrible world to live in where this chain of reaction. So what do people do? Just shut the fuck up, don't they?
Well, that's right, but I think that's what happens with the politicians as well. I mean, they're at the coalface, about all of this, and they've got to be seen to be doing stuff. They've got to be seen to be doing something. I mean, our thinking about this is that there shouldn't be anything done about it. It's just, it was the actions of one guy. You can't stop it.
Yeah.
I mean, the only real way to have stopped this whole thing was to have a security guard at the door of the mosque with a gun.
Yeah.
That's probably the only way you would have been able to stop this. But of
Or
course,
you have a security guard in everybody's room, or you have one of those big screens like in Fahrenheit 451.
yeah, or everyone carries a gun. Like that's the NRA's answer to everything as well.
Yeah.
If everyone's got a gun, then these things will end much more quickly. And I mean, they've got a point.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got a point.
They've got a point, but then
yeah.
you've got the fact, I think, so many thousands of gunshot deaths in the United States are accidents every year where a kid finds a gun somewhere and shoots himself in the head.
Yeah, that does. I don't know if it's thousands, but
Yeah, I think it is.
Is
Like
thousands?
accidental gun deaths is in the thousands.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, speaking about guns, so New Zealand have banned the sale of semi-automatic weapons and have put into place a buyback scheme which has cost about $100 million to $200 million.
Yep.
Thing is, the New Zealand government has actually no idea how many semi-automatic guns are in circulation.
No.
And and of course, at the same time, and this happened, you've got people like Bernie Sanders coming out and saying this is what real action to stop gun violence looks like.
Yeah, I mean, it's a disingenuous comparison, though. I mean, look, even Ardern made a disingenuous comparison herself to Australia because she said she got agreement on this new gun law in a couple of days or something, or 5 days or 6 days, where it took Australia 13 days. Well, John Howard had to get 6 states together and a couple of territories to agree.
Yep.
She doesn't. She doesn't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's obviously way easier to get something done like that, and you don't have the same culture that America has around guns. Of course, it's way harder in America.
Well, I mean, it's written into their constitution.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why it's in the constitution. It's, to stop the tyranny of the government.
Yeah.
And, people have the right to self-defense. I mean, these kind of laws, it reduces the freedom for everyone.
Yeah.
One person has done this. You're giving this guy what he wants, which is just creating a less free society.
Yep.
And it's true that, and I mean, the obviously the opposite argument is that, well, it'll be harder for people to do mass shootings if you can't get semi-automatic weapons, and that is true. It's definitely less convenient, but nutters like this guy are going to find a way to kill a lot of people, whether it's a bomb or driving a car into a group of people or, whatever it is, subway gas attacks.
Yeah.
These people are going to do it, whatever way. So,
well, I mean, what do you do? You've started in on the politicians, Ardern. Our own Prime Minister comes out and he starts excoriating social media companies. So he said that media companies that broadcast terrorist attacks, he was writing this to Shinzo Abe, who's the chairman of the G20. He's calling for an agreement on clear consequences for companies whose platforms are used to facilitate and normalise horrific acts. I mean, this is just populist bullshit to make it look like you're doing something in the face of media outrage. I mean, how can Facebook make sure that people won't live stream horrific acts? Well, you shut down live streaming. That's the only way you can do it. That is the only way you can guarantee it.
Yep.
How can YouTube stop such videos being uploaded to a platform where 500 hours of video are uploaded every minute? 720,000 hours of video are uploaded every single day to YouTube. How can you do it? Well, shut it down. Shut down YouTube. That's the only foolproof way to stop it. Everything else is bullshit. You're just talking...
I think some of these politicians want to go back to the 1980s when they pretty much controlled the narrative through mass media. I think this is the way. So anyway, speaking of the Australian Prime Minister, he has he got together the heads of the social media companies in Australia, and they're proposing new legislation which will compel social media platforms to delete whatever the government deems to be abhorrent, violent material.
Christ.
And hang on, that's not even the best bit. The best bit, well, the legislation is still being drafted and will contain provisions for the criminal prosecution and potential jailing of social media executives and office holders who do not obey its dictates.
God. The arrogance of the government to think that they can get to decide for everybody else what abhorrent material is.
Oh, they will. I
I
don't doubt they will do it, given what these guys have done to the technology industry in the last 5 years. We have mandatory data retention laws, so all ISPs have to keep that data for 2 years. Whatever you look up online, all of your metadata, which can be searched without a warrant.
Yeah.
They've introduced backdoor encryption laws in the last couple of months.
Do you know any publicly listed VPNs? I mean, their stock's going to go through the roof, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just what people are doing. I mean, and now the ISPs in Australia have started banning various websites at the directive of the Australian Federal Police. And the easy way to get around that is just to use a VPN or change your DNS settings on your network. Most people aren't going to do that. But the people who want to view this stuff, they're going to do it. It's not a big deal. It's easy to do.
I mean, we just found out this morning that, I don't know if this is in reaction to what Morrison was going on about, Facebook has announced it will ban praise or support for white nationalism and white separatism as part of a stepped-up crackdown on hate speech. Right? Now, you can, not going to be any problems with this, is it? It's going to go real well because, according to half the progressive idiots in Silicon Valley, praising Donald Trump would support... white, praise for white nationalism. I mean, what if you say something reasonable, which people say all the time, like, Why don't diversity advocates argue for more diversity in Japan or Ghana? Why is it only white majority countries that need all this diversity? Is that supporting white separatism? I mean, the idea that these social media companies can actually police this stuff is laughable. Their algorithms always screw it up. They ban people that shouldn't be banned, and they let other things go that shouldn't be let go according to their own rules. I mean, it is an absolute joke. There's this false idea running around that, oh yes, the government, we can all do something. No, you can't. You can't prevent psychos carrying out psychopathic acts.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you got the politicians that they're just blaming free speech and the internet for the ideals and actions of a single person.
Well, listen to ScoMo. ScoMo says...
ScoMo is Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister of Australia.
Yes. Yeah. He says, it's unacceptable to treat the internet as an ungoverned space. And that's actually the great thing about it, or it used to be. It used to be the great thing about it, because it is regulated now in Europe, as we now know. And it's not like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are free-for-alls anyway. I mean, at one point they probably were, but they already have their own terms of service, which are already onerous. ISPs will ban people they consider beyond the pale, and there are laws around what you can and can't say online. But it's just, oh, look over there. There's a thing that's not governed yet. Let's regulate it. It's
impossible to regulate the internet. I mean, they'll try, but all it's doing is pushing people to extremism.
Yeah,
it pushes people to the dark spaces on the internet where they're not regulated. I mean, it won't end well.
And speaking of, forget about the government for a moment. The Australian telcos, without any prompting from the federal government, decided to block certain sites immediately. I think you already mentioned 4chan, 8chan. I didn't even know 8chan existed until this. Vote.
Nice way to, don't look at me, government. I don't even know what it is.
VOAT. I've never heard of that one either. Zero Hedge got blocked, and it didn't have the footage on it. Live Leak, which always has, pretty much, if you want to see something like that, you go straight to Live Leak. That was blocked. But the thing is, and Optus and Vodafone didn't say which domains they blocked, but people did tests and all of those things were blocked on them as well. But this is what Telstra had to say. We understand this may inconvenience some legitimate users of these sites, but these are extreme circumstances and we feel this is the right thing to do. I don't give a fuck what you think is the right thing to do. I pay you for a service. The service is to access the internet. I don't care. Again, the industry body that the private industry body of telcos said these ISPs have sought to balance community expectations to remove access to the video with the need to minimise any inconvenience that may arise from legitimate content being blocked. And again, I don't know, maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way, but I don't understand why you're now in the business of balancing community expectations. And can you show me the data on that? Can you show me the survey that you did about what the community expects to be done about it? I mean, do your job. I guess the only thing I could see here is that it's what I said before, it's arse covering, so people can't say, oh, look, Telstra allowed people to view it, and isn't that horrific, and we should all boycott Telstra and go get a new ISP. I mean, to me, it's just this encroachment of, when you've got both government and corporations doing this stuff, it's really troubling, I think.
Well, that's pretty much the definition of fascism. Yeah, exactly, fascism.
It is.
I think, my point of view is I don't care if Telstra blocks websites, because I'll just go to a different ISP. It's only when all the ISPs are doing this.
Well, it seems.
But there's ways to get. There's ways to get around it. I mean, it's not that much of an inconvenience.
Yeah, it's just troubling as a principle, as someone that believes in freedom. And I think maybe to summarise, at the heart of all this, the attempts to censor, and particularly by governments.
Well, believing that censorship is the answer.
Well, yeah, but what it indicates is a general distrust of the general public, that the average person in the street cannot be trusted to watch, read, or listen to certain things for fear they'll go nuts. So I watch a. I'm not even going to say it. Well, shouldn't we just close down everything? Shouldn't we just have one state-sanctioned TV station, radio station, one state-sanctioned podcast, one website representing one...
Can we be that podcast?
I don't think we're going to get a look in somehow. Really, no. But one state-sanctioned podcast, one website dispensing one bland point of view. And I think George Orwell wrote something about that, didn't he?
the state made a motion to nolly-cross the charges against Jussie Smollett and to seal the record in this case. We believe that it was the correct result in this case. We're very happy for this result, and we are very anxious for Jussie to get on with his career and his life.
So I want to make a public apology to Jussie Smollett. Clearly, he didn't do nothing. But actually, I think Piers Morgan's apology was the best. He wrote, "I'm sorry, you're even more despicable than I thought you were, and so are the shameful prosecutors who let you off this repulsive, fake hate crime." Now, that's the second time this week I've agreed with something Piers Morgan said. So
You feeling okay?
I don't want to make a habit of that, but I think that sums it up pretty well. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we did a whole 30 minutes about Jussie Smollett, I think, in the first episode, and it's strange to see a guy who's clearly guilty of staging a fake hate crime, and just to see all the charges get dropped all of a sudden, just out of the blue.
And not only that, he forfeited his bond, so it's almost like, yeah, pay us 10 grand and it'll go away. That's what the bond was. But you would have thought the smart thing to do was shut up and walk away. But no, he's come out, tearful. And I'll read what he actually said, like his to the media. "I've been truthful and consistent on every single level since day one. I would not be my mother's son if I was capable of one drop of what I've been accused of," which doesn't make any sense at all. "This has been an incredibly difficult time, honestly one of the worst of my entire life. But I am a man of faith," again, meaningless, "and I am a man that has knowledge of my history, and I would not bring my family, our lives, or the movement through a fire like this. I just wouldn't." His bottom lip trembled as he added, "I'd like nothing more than just to get back to work and move on with my life, but make no mistakes. I will always continue to fight for the justice, equality, and betterment of marginalised people everywhere." Now,
was he holding the Academy Award in his hand when he was reading that?
This is almost playing out like a movie, isn't it? It is
yeah.
playing out like a movie.
Yeah.
People are writing the script of this right now, right? They probably just can't put the ending.
I think
in
they probably need to wait another month because I don't think this is over by a long shot.
No, the FBI is still investigating.
The FBI is still investigating it, but who knows what that means? But okay. Well, so what we're seeing here, we're seeing all the charges against him were dropped.
Yep.
His record was expunged.
Yep.
And the case permanently sealed.
Yeah. Well, I have seen some updates recently that say they are going to unseal it, and the sealing was a mistake. Have you heard that?
What a surprise.
Coming from Ms. Banks. Ms.
Yep.
Banks, who is, or was, what was she? She had to recuse herself from the case.
No, that's Kim Fox. You're thinking of Kim Fox, who is the State Attorney General who recused herself from this case on February 13 because apparently she actually knew Jussie. Apparently they go to the same gym, I think was the reason she'd recused herself.
Right.
But interestingly enough,
the same gym where the Osundairo Nigerian brothers,
maybe they share a
they
personal
got the same trainer.
Yeah. Well, it's come to light though, and there's a series of text messages between Kim Fox and a Tina Chen, who was formerly Michelle Obama's chief of staff. Now, these text messages and emails happened between February the 1st and February the 13th.
Right.
February 13th is when Kim Fox recuses herself.
Yep.
So apparently Tina Chen contacted Kim Fox and emailed her to say that the actor's family had unspecified concerns about the investigation. And Chen is also turns out to be a close friend of the Chicago mayor, Rahm Emanuel's wife.
Jeez.
And Chen said she was acting on behalf of the Empire actor and his family. And a relative later exchanged texts with Kim Fox. She's recused herself on February the 13th. Why didn't she do that earlier? I mean, she must have known from day one that she couldn't be impartial, given that she knew Smollett.
I think the 13th, if we go back, 13th is the day the Osundairo brothers were nabbed coming back on the airport.
Right.
Because there was a good 2 weeks. Because there's a good 2 weeks. It happened on the 29th of January, I think, something around there. So it's a good. So she's waited 2 weeks to recuse herself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and full well knowing that she knows this guy.
Yep.
But it really does seem like they're there has been a conspiracy here, an alleged conspiracy from certain people to try and get Jussie's case moved to the federal level.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you think they would want to do that?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, one theory is that at the federal level, they can exert more influence to get this thing, uncovered.
Right.
To actually shut it down.
Right.
At the state level, they might not have that flexibility.
Yeah.
But anyway, the Chicago mayor and obviously the local police are very upset about this, as we heard from those clips. There's more investigations from the FBI about why this was actually shut down at the state level.
Interesting choice of words. It was a whitewash. Yeah. You call this a blackwash?
Yeah. And we've got an interview with the acting district attorney who took over from Kim Fox.
Yeah.
And he was asked by a CBS reporter, Adriana Diaz, about dropping the charges, and she said, "Do you believe that he is innocent?" And he replied, "I do not believe he is innocent." And the reasons given for the dropping of the case were mostly that he's done community service. I think he did 15 hours, which is
right.
That must have been hard.
Wow, yeah.
Might have chipped a fingernail. And he's paid his $10,000 bond, which obviously would have covered the costs of this case.
What's that? 1 week's pay?
Yeah, 1 week's pay for it. Yeah. Well, I mean, imagine how much money do you think the Chicago police spent looking into this case?
God,
it's probably in the millions.
Yep.
And he also cited that many other cases, have been dropped. Because they're just obviously it's just not important. This one really, is it?
They rarely get dropped because there's absolutely
no evidence.
Yeah. They get dropped because there's absolutely no evidence. But in this case, when you've got a pile of evidence, everybody, the superintendent of police, the mayor, everybody's screaming at the top of their lungs like, "We do not go along with this. And it was completely out of left field. We didn't see it coming." I mean, don't pretend that this is, it's just one of those cases that time to time we just don't go through with them.
Well, you could probably claim that nobody really, there was no victim of a crime really, assuming that this is a hoax. But I think the larger effect, I mean, I kind of look at it like it's a bizarro Rodney King situation where, you've got the potential outcome of this is dividing a nation.
Yeah. Yeah,
perpetuating this thing that hate crime is a huge issue and an increasing issue, and
we see Kamala Harris. She said exactly that.
Yeah,
they always pivot to that. Cory Booker before, but she was out just the other day on that as well, saying we have to look at the rise of hate crime, which I think I said on the last podcast. Actually, the last podcast we talked about Smollett was. It's not what you think it is because of the way it's reported. Actually, the rise in hate crime, it's below the average of the last, not the rise itself, the level of hate crime is below the average of the last 22 years for which we have data. Another inconvenient little thing for someone like Kamala Harris is why the African-American community are overrepresented in the perpetrators of hate crimes, almost to double their number in the population. So they are consistently over 20% of the identified perpetrators of hate crimes when they're 12.5%, 13% of the population.
Yeah. Well, speaking about Kamala Harris, Kim Fox and her actually have a history, surprisingly enough. So Kim Fox tweeted when she tweeted, "I'm so excited that Kamala Harris has decided to run for president. I would not be where I am today without her guidance during my first run for political office.
Jesus.
And she has continued to mentor me as I work to reform the criminal justice system on Cook County."
I said this, I forget who I said this to recently, but there's going to be a massive consultancy business for people to train people how not to leave a trace on social media of saying anything.
Don't write checks, is that one of them?
Actually, I don't think that's, we probably knew that, 50 years ago, don't write checks to people that are going to carry out hoaxes for you. But yeah, like just expunging all records from social media or just training people not to say anything ever, which will mean you'll just be making bland pronouncements like, isn't the weather nice today? I mean, there's got to be a massive business in that. Could be.
Could be, yeah.
It's like, little circle fingers.
Yeah. I think my guess, and there's a lot of theories floating around about the links between Kim Fox and Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and Jussie Smollett. And my guess and my theory is that on Jussie's phone records, there's a number of calls to and from Kamala Harris.
Right.
And that's the reason he didn't want to hand over his phone records.
What?
And my guess is that's why this whole thing's been pretty much swept under the rug now, because I'm not going to sit here and say that I think Kamala Harris had anything to do with this hoax. I don't think she's not dumb enough to be involved in something like that. But I think that there is definitely a connection between them. And I think she doesn't want anything that she's running for president. She doesn't need this thing. She doesn't need to be connected to this thing.
Well, as someone who doesn't generally believe in conspiracy theories because they usually don't pan out, I'm just going to say that that's the view of Mick on this podcast, and I don't subscribe to it because I require evidence before I see that stuff. But I mean, there's obviously where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, there's just a lot that stinks about.
Yeah, I mean,
this.
why cover this thing up?
Yeah,
why?
And it's so blatant. Like, what will be interesting to see is like Smollett in his just smug demeanour comes out and says stuff about, I will continue to fight for justice and equality and the betterment of marginalised people. Now, the quote-unquote marginalised people, if they have any integrity, moral integrity at all, they will stand up and disown this guy and say, no, you don't stand up for anything we believe in.
Well, they're hardly marginalised given that he just got off 16 counts of fraud. I mean,
what is this? Minority privilege?
Is he going to be standing up for white males? That's
yeah, it's. But again, we'll get back to what we said at the beginning of the podcast. Isn't this just another arrow in the quiver of Trump and Republicans to play?
It absolutely is. It's just another red pill after the whole Trump collusion thing. And it just confirms that it's okay to make false racial accusations.
Yep.
He showed us where the real privilege is in the country.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's definitely not white people.
It's not a surprise, to be honest, to people who are paying attention.
I mean, and it's disrespectful to anyone that's been racially attacked as well.
Yeah.
And he's just revealed himself to be a giant.
He is a piece of shit.
He is.
He really is a piece of shit.